So, what is the truth about homosexuality? It seems that everyone has an opinion as to whether or not they accept homosexuality as a viable lifestyle or not. But is there a universal truth that tells us whether homosexuality is, in fact, natural? What is the nature of homosexuality? Is there an answer to this? I have found that whether a person accepts homosexuality or not really depends on a couple of things. First, it's what they've been taught from childhood about homosexuality, from the church about homosexuality. And in their current position, adults will believe that homosexuality is an acceptable lifestyle or not, depending on whether or not they believe homosexuality is whether you're born with it or whether it's something that you choose. And based upon those things, a person decides where they're going to stand on it. Now, about 70% of the population of the United States believes that homosexuality should be accepted. In Canada, that rises from 70 to 80, 85%. In Russia, that sinks down to about 14%. 14% of the people in Russia believe that homosexuality should be accepted. So the country that a person lives in has a lot to say about what they believe about homosexuality. Religion has a tremendous influence on whether an individual should accept homosexuality as natural or as aberrant. Hinduism seems conflicted on what they believe about homosexuality, but some sects in Hinduism do embrace homosexuality. Buddhism does not speak directly against homosexuality. They may accept it or not, depending on actually the culture or the country that the Buddhist lives in. Islam, on the other hand, outright rejects homosexuality as a viable lifestyle. It's in conflict, they say, with Islamic theology. Christianity, just the same. Christianity has in the past traditionally rejected and condemned acts of homosexuality. So the religion that you embrace, or is predominant in your country, has a lot to say about whether or not you're going to accept it. What about science? We always want to hear what science has to say. Sometimes they've been wrong, but most of the time they've informed us about truth and reality. Now, science has not identified a particular gene that they say causes homosexuality, but science agrees that homosexuality is a very complex combination of genetic and hormonal influences. Complex. And yes, genetic and hormonal influences. And there are many scientific studies that show that sexual orientation is biologically determined, that there are definitely scientific patterns associated with sexual orientation. Now, I lived in Ray County, Tennessee in 2004. I was a pastor at one of the predominant churches in Ray County at the time, and the Ray County Commission met together and voted to ban homosexuality in Ray County. Ban it. You can't be gay in Ray. That was the saying. They criticized and criminalized homosexual activity. Now, ironically, this happened in the very same place where the Scopes monkey trial had taken place in 1925, in which a school teacher was found guilty of teaching Darwinian evolution in violation of Tennessee's Butler Act. Now, his conviction was later overturned by the Supreme Court of the state. But same place. Not long after the anti-gay resolution was passed in Ray County, the county commission had to meet and rescind their actions, I guess because they realized that what they had decided was against the Constitution of the United States of America. Being a pastor there, I spoke out against the action of the county commission. I encouraged us to have compassion on them, but to not accept what they were trying to do. I spoke about that in the pulpit. I spoke about that in the community newspaper, the local newspaper, and television interview. And afterwards, it's several months later that the homosexual community decided that they were going to have a gay day in Ray, and they were going to do this on a little island out, limited access, out right near the top, not far from the courthouse, where the Scopes monkey trial took place. And then, when the religious conservatives heard about this, they decided they're going to have an anti-gay day in Ray, and it's going to be the day before Gay Day in Ray. Sounds like a circus, and it was, because all the major news media was there to cover these events. And so I went to the anti-gay day just to see what was going on. They had moved their festival out underneath the trees of the courthouse. Now, ironically, this is the exact same place where the Scopes monkey trial took place. It was moved from inside the courthouse to outside under the trees because of the heat. And so, yeah, what a disaster. What interesting. Society is confused on this topic. If the government cannot give us any help, if science and religion cannot agree on how to guide us on this issue, who are we going to turn to for answers? What are we going to do here? What's the truth about homosexuality? Do gay people choose to be homosexual, or is that something that is decided for them? And how can we be sure of the answer? Everyone has their own truth on these matters, and they are not afraid to let you know what they think about it. But for us to have integrity, and integrity again is important, but for us to have integrity on this question, we must search ourselves. We must scrutinize our beliefs. What are our truths based upon? Check that out. If we do not challenge ourselves on this, we really cannot pretend to be persons of integrity. Now, that's not judgment, that's just logic. Integrity follows searching for truth. Not searching for truth does not equal integrity. So if we don't have integrity, then what have we got to say about anything? Every person's belief is based upon their programming, their initial belief. They can challenge it, they can become educated about it, they can change their belief, but every person starts out with a basic programming from their community, their family, their society, their government, their educational institutions. What have I been told about homosexuality from childhood? This is all a part of our programming, our religion, the attitude of society. When you look at Canada with 80% accepting homosexuality and Russia 14% accepting homosexuality, it's obvious that society has a lot to say about what we're going to believe. And what's the truth? What's the government's view? What about peer pressure? What is science discovering in its latest studies? These are important things. What are our childhood educational institutions telling us about this? What are our individual teachers telling us when nobody else in the school even knows what they're telling us? Do we have friends who are homosexual? Because this is going to help influence us one way or the other on what we believe about homosexuality. So what do we believe, and how do we determine truth? Now, things have been changing, and I would say this. When I say that having friends who are homosexual helps inform us about the nature of homosexuality, I'm speaking from experience. I have friends who are homosexual, and seeing them together and being with them and understanding them as human beings and their basic understanding of life, their basic understanding of faith and God and everything in life really informs me about what they're about. Now, lately things have been changing. Things in the last couple of decades have become more open to homosexuality in the United States, but basically these traditionally, all of these institutions, home, family, education, government, religions, all have been unaccepting of homosexuality as a norm. So have we been right or have we been wrong? I mean, what's the truth about this, really? In general, society has been considered that homosexuality was an aberration. Most people have not tried to understand it, and so it is passed down through the generations that homosexuality is a willful deviation from the norm, the natural. I was told all my life, partly by my parents, by my church, that homosexuality does not exist in nature outside of the human race. In studying homosexuality, and when I was a pastor in Ray County, I spent 3 months doing nothing but reading book after book, buying books, going to the library, and trying to research what is the truth about homosexuality. And one of the things that I found is that homosexuality does in fact happen in nature. Yes, it does. It happens in the animal kingdom. Absolutely. What does the scientific community have to say about it all? When it comes to psychiatry, you've got psychiatry, then you've got psychology. Psychiatry, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychological Association, the DSM, is the Bible of psychiatric diagnoses. The DSM-3 in 1980 classified homosexuality as an ego-dystonic homosexuality, EDH, a desire to change. It's a sexual disorder, they claim. It's defined as a persistent pattern of unwanted homosexual arousal and a desire to change one's sexuality. Well, that's kind of primitive. But after much research, then later in 2013, the DSM-5, that was the DSM-3 in 1980. In 2013, the DSM-5, after much research about this topic of homosexuality, the DSM-5 removed homosexuality as a diagnosis altogether. Scientific knowledge changes with study and with new understanding and evidence. Scientific research continues to explore precipitating factors to a person's sexual orientation being turned toward homosexuality, and they found that yes, genetics and hormones play a part in a person being homosexual. There has not been a single genetic marker found to determine homosexuality or heterosexuality, but is no doubt in the scientific community that genes and hormones do play a role in what your orientation is going to be. And whatever it is, that's what it is, folks. As far as hormonal influences is concerned, science has found that the brain reacts differently to pheromones in us that in determining sexual orientation. I would go on with this and say a lot of stuff that I don't understand and that maybe not many of us do. But it does come to the conclusion, science does come to the conclusion, that most people appear to have no actual choice in determining their sexual orientation. I asked a homosexual friend of mine one time, Rachel, when did you first know you were gay? She looked straight at me and she said, Ken, when did you first know you were heterosexual? And I had to laugh because she really had me there. I liked pretty little girls since I was in kindergarten, and it never did stop. I had another friend who was a counselor. Actually, she was a church member of mine, and she had a daughter who was lesbian. And she came to see me when I first came to that church as pastor, and she wanted to know what I thought about homosexuality. And I said, I believe that whatever causes homosexuality, I believe that the person has no real choice of it. And I said, I don't know whether that, and I knew at that time, I understood that there was no single genetic marker that we could identify as a homosexual gene. But I said, I don't know how a person comes to that point. It could be genetic. It could be an experience that they've had young in life, a traumatic experience, a sexual experience. I don't know what the cause is, but I believe that it just is what it is. The person is either gay or not gay. And she was a counselor, a therapist. She had a practice in town, and she told me that she believed that it was natural for a person to be gay or heterosexual, that it was genetic. She believed that. She said that her daughter was gay, lesbian, and that when she was 4 years old, her daughter came to her and she said, "Mommy, why did God make me to be a girl when He knew I wanted to be a boy?" Now, folks, 4 years old, really? And you say it's a choice? So she tried to be like everybody else her entire life. She dated boys. She tried to be with boys. She married. It didn't last long, but she married. And then she admitted to herself that she was gay. Now, I knew the guy that she married. I knew her husband. He was my barber. After they divorced, I met him, and he was my barber. And I asked him about this thing, and he said there was no doubt from the very beginning that she was not attracted to men and did not want to have anything sexually to do with men. And that pretty much says who she was all of her life. From 4 years old on, she understood, but she didn't come to face it in her own life even, that she was homosexual. She grew up with all that conflict and all that pain and all that disapproval hanging over her head. Now let me say this. I had another lady in another town whose daughter was gay. I sat at their table, I ate with them, I knew them. And then one day she told me that when she was 5 years old, her little girl came to her and said almost the exact same thing. "Why did God make me to be a girl?" Isn't that amazing? I mean, that's got to be something that, is beyond what, it's not an accident. In addition to the Psychiatric Association saying there's no such diagnosis as homosexuality, as an aberrant behavior, also the American Psychological Association says that homosexuality, gay, and bisexual are not mental health disorders. Not mental health disorders. The APA says there's no association between these sexual orientations and psychopathology. Now, concerning these various orientations, I find it very interesting that there is very little difference between the percentage in society who says that they accept homosexuality and the percentage of people in the church who say that they accept homosexuality. So that tells me that the church really is just a replication of society. The thoughts and the attitudes of society just are infused into the church in the same percentages. And it creates a social divide between people and between religions, between everybody. I mean, for not accepting homosexuality. As far as Bible passages, the religious right claims to support their views through biblical passages. And I've had the opportunity to research this in depth and to challenge that. Most importantly, in the Hebrew world of the Old Testament, homosexuality is non-existent. They did not understand homosexuality as a sexual orientation. In that world, everybody was heterosexual, created to be heterosexual. And so if you did something other than behave in a heterosexual manner, you were exhibiting aberrant behavior. It was not normal. And they labeled it as wrong. That was just their misunderstanding of it all. I mean, we can't judge them any more than we want to be judged ourselves. But they just didn't understand homosexuality at all. And so all of the Old Testament passages that deal with homosexuality come to that point believing that everybody is supposed to be heterosexual. Now, same-sex actions are not a part of God's law to Moses. Now later, the priestly tribe, the tribe of Levi, who was put in charge of spiritual things, they were given the task of judging people's situations, activities, guiding people's lives. They ended up creating, in doing this, they created 631 additional laws. Moses received the law from God, but that wasn't enough. The law from God was not enough. They added 631 more to it. And this was not God adding it to them. Matter of fact, when Jesus refers to the law of the Old Testament, he refers to it as the law of Moses. Not the 631 tribe of Levi additions. They're not the law of God. They're just not the law of God. Go to the New Testament. In his Apostle Paul's time, he did much of the writing of the New Testament. Same thing. Homosexuality is not understood as a sexual lifestyle, as a normal sexual orientation. It's not understood as normal. It's understood as wrong. It's changing God's intentions from being heterosexual to being homosexual. That's what they believed in that time. Not just the New Testament believers, but all of the societies pretty much that existed during that time. Now, most of what Paul spoke against in the New Testament was pederasty. Much of the Christian world still sees homosexuality as an act against what's natural and what is supposed to be created by God. Sexual orientation created by God. It's not there. Now let's get this out of the way. This is going to be important. You know, it used to be a saying floating around years ago, what would Jesus do? Well, let's ask this. Homosexuality was just as prevalent in the time of Jesus as it was in the Old Testament time, just as much as it is today. Homosexuality was real. And do you know what Jesus said about homosexuality and those who followed homosexuality? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Now that ought to tell us something. And then let's do this. How about us asking those who are homosexual to explain? Tell them you're trying to understand homosexuality. Explain to me how you came to understand yourself as homosexual, what that means to you. Ask them. Instead of making decisions about them and in judging them, why not just talk to them about it? Let me say this. It's pretty good proof that people do not choose homosexuality whenever suicide among teenage homosexuals is so out the roof. It is 4 times more likely for a teenager who is gay or lesbian to commit suicide than it is any other teen. 4 times as much. If you take 100 teens committing suicide, 75 of them, at least, I'm not a mathematician, are going to be gay, and the smaller amount, just almost none, are going to be heterosexual. I am impressed with Mel White. I came across his autobiography, Stranger at the Gate, when I was researching homosexuality as a pastor in Dayton, Tennessee, Ray County. And it's an amazing story. Stranger at the Gate, to be gay and Christian in America. Now, Mel was a fundamentalist Baptist. He wrote the autobiographies, he ghost wrote the autobiographies of Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson, two outstanding conservative Christian leaders, very influential in their time. And he ghost wrote their autobiographies. He was a clergy in the Baptist faith. And he did not believe in homosexuality as a viable lifestyle. You know what the problem with that was? Mel was gay. He couldn't help it and he couldn't stop it. He was gay. He tried to stop it. He married. He tried to have a marriage with a woman. And that wasn't working out. He struggled with it. He fought with it. He went to counselor after counselor after a counselor trying to overcome these feelings of homosexuality. So, yes, evidently, he and his wife divorced and he came out as gay. Now, here's the important thing. His autobiography, the foreword to it was written by his ex-wife, the woman he lived with for so long. And she says this: Mel is a good person, kind, generous, funny, insightful, a man of faith and integrity. I ought to know. For 25 years I was married to him. I know what he went through trying to understand himself and what it means to be both gay and Christian. Whether you agree or disagree with Mel's perspective on the issue, I hope you will take his words seriously. I ask you to do this not because I want you to have sympathy for Mel, although I was with him during that great struggle to accept himself, and I do have sympathy. She says, I hope you will take Mel's words seriously, because what we learn together will be important to you and to your family as well. For example, after all these decades of trying, we discovered that no one can choose or change his or her sexual orientation. Amazing. Counselor after counselor. You know what he even tried? It came to this. At one point, he submitted himself to shock therapy, electrical shock therapy, to try and get this idea of homosexuality out of him. Counselor after counselor, prayer and more prayer. And no. It was not to be. It was not to be. And you have sympathy for people who are rejected by society for being just simply who they are, just by being who they are. You know? And if we are to be people of integrity, then we have to ask ourselves, why do we believe what we believe? And is what we believe the path to truth and freedom? Thank you for listening. God bless you.